Il pas de orchestra. It is an illusion.
Shh, it's the Film Flamers.
Hey guys, I'm Chris.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert.
And we're the Film Flamers.
And we are continuing our discussion into David Lynch movies as a remembrance for the late, great surrealist auteur.
That's right. And last week we covered Blue Velvet.
That's right. And, you know, he has quite a filmography. So.
He does, but we both kind of discovered that, or if we didn't already know, that Blue Velvet was kind of the foundation or the key to the rest of his filmography. So it was very fortuitous that we started with that one because it kind of, in a way, I want to say culminated as far as this kind of germination of his artistic itch, if you will, into Mulholland Drive.
Which was, after Blue Velvet, I would say probably his most, praised film critically. But you're right, we are here to talk about Mulholland Drive.
Which is a 2001 surrealist neo-noir mystery art film written and directed by David Lynch. Its plot follows an aspiring actress who arrives in Los Angeles where she befriends a woman who is suffering from amnesia after a car accident. The film follows several other vignettes and characters, including a Hollywood director who encounters mob interference while casting for his latest film. And Lynch's tagline for the film is, quote, "A love story in the city of dreams." Just like Blue Velvet, and Twin Peaks, by the way, Angelo Badalamenti composed the film's score.
The film was originally conceived as a television pilot for ABC, with footage shot and edited in 1999 as an open-ended mystery. After viewing Lynch's cut, however, television executives canceled the proposed TV series. Lynch then secured funding from French production company Studio Canal to make the material into a feature film, writing an ending to the project and filming new material. The resulting surrealist narrative has left the film's events open to interpretation. Lynch himself has declined to offer an explanation, leaving audiences, critics, and even the film's own cast to speculate on its meaning.
Okay, listeners.
Silencio. No hay banda.
This is Mulholland Drive.
I can't believe it. I'm just so excited to be here. I'm in this dream place.
This one comes highly recommended.
Dream place. What are you doing?
Get out of the car.
Yeah.
The girl is still missing.
What's wrong? I just don't know who I am. I wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive. Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
Silencio.
This is all an illusion.
You want to know who you are, don't you?
Where's this going?
Mulholland Drive.
It's been a very strange day.
Getting stranger.
Silencio.
A wide-eyed ingenue, Betty Elms, played by Naomi Watts, arrives in Los Angeles. Her suitcase is stuffed with optimism and naive ambition. She's a picture of small-town innocence, eager to carve out her place among the stars. But when she stumbles upon a woman with no memory, dark-haired, sultry, and draped in the kind of danger that begs to be ignored, her sunlit Hollywood fantasy warps into something twisted. The woman, played by Laura Harring, calling herself Rita after spotting a poster of Gilda starring Rita Hayworth, is a blank slate with a head injury and a purse full of cash and a strange blue key. Together, Betty and Rita embark on a detective game, chasing the echoes of a mysterious and traumatic car accident that Rita was involved in on Mulholland Drive.
You said the thing.
That's the thing. Meanwhile, The city pulses with malevolent forces. A film director, Adam Kesher, played by Justin Theroux, watches his life unravel at the hands of enigmatic Hollywood overlords, sinister men in suits who insist he cast a particular blonde in his next picture, as if fate itself were already storyboarded. There's also a jittery hitman botching a job in the most absurd fashion, a cowboy offering cryptic advice, and a man who fears a monster lurking behind a diner. As Betty and Rita's search deepens, so does their connection, culminating in a night of carpet-munching passion that seems almost too perfect. But perfection never lasts. The clues, the people, the roles they play all begin to unravel, culminating in the discovery of a corpse that looks eerily familiar. The illusion fractures. Suddenly, Betty is gone, and in her place is Diane Selwyn, a bitter, broken woman suffocating in the wreckage of her failed Hollywood dream. Rita is no longer a helpless amnesiac, but Camilla Rhodes, a rising star who toys with Diane's desperate love. The roles have been reversed, or maybe they were always this way. And Diane, consumed by jealousy and regrets, spirals into despair after having her unrequited lover killed by a hitman she met in a diner. Her dreamlike fantasy collapses under the weight of her own guilt. Time seems to stop, or loops back in on itself, and it's clear that Mulholland Drive isn't just a road. It's a threshold between dreams and nightmares, love and obsession, identity and delusion. In Los Angeles, the real horror isn't the monster behind the diner. It's the way Hollywood chews people up and spits them out and leaves them haunted by the ghosts of what could have been. Ghosts who are, because reasons, dancing the jitterbug.
The end.
That was so poetic.
That is probably one of the best synopses I have ever written, because this movie, ladies and gentlemen, is hard to write a synopsis for. And that is the most straightforward I can fucking get it.
So, in this month of Lynchian films, as we chose the ones that we were going to do, I was just like, God, I don't want to write the synopsis for Blue Velvet. And then I was like, oh, but I really don't want to write the synopsis for Mulholland Drive. So it really worked out in my favor.
Yeah. Mulholland Drive was released on October 12th, 2001 on 66 screens. It would gross almost $600,000 opening weekend, securing the number 14 spot, damn, not 6th, at the box office. It would eventually expand to 666, damn it, 247 screens at its highest, but would never crack the box office top 10. Ultimately, it would gross $20 million worldwide against a reported budget of $15 million.
Well, at least they got that $5 million. Mulholland Drive has a score of 84% on Rotten Tomatoes and is certified fresh. The audience score sits at 87%.
Wow.
I know. Shocking to me. The site's consensus reads, David Lynch's dreamlike and mysterious Mulholland Drive is a twisty neo-noir with an unconventional structure that features a mesmerizing performance from Naomi Watts as a woman on the dark fringes of Hollywood. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 87, indicating universal acclaim.
Oh. Since its release, Mulholland Drive has received both some of the harshest epithets and some of the most lavish praise in recent cinematic history. Roger Ebert, who had often been dismissive of Lynch's work, awarded the film 4 stars out of 4, writing, quote, David Lynch has been working towards Mulholland Drive all of his career, and now that he's arrived there, I forgive him for Wild at Heart and even Lost Highway. At last, his experiment doesn't shatter the test tubes. Interesting way to put that, I like that. The movie is a surrealist dreamscape in the form of a Hollywood film noir, and the less sense it makes, the more we can't stop watching it. I like that review.
I do too, and Roger Ebert was very harsh to Lynch during his career, but he really, really enjoyed the shit out of Mulholland Drive. In fact, later on, he would put it on some of his best movie lists. Jay Hoberman of The Village Voice stated, this voluptuous phantasmagoria.
Ooh.
Don't get anything on you, Jay. This voluptuous phantasmagoria is certainly Lynch's strongest movie since Blue Velvet and maybe Eraserhead. The very things that failed him in the bad boy rockabilly debacle of Lost Highway, the atmosphere of free-floating menace, pointless transmigration of souls, provocatively dropped plot stitches, gimcrack alternate universes are out here brilliantly rehabilitated.
Let me hand you a towel,
I know.
Jay Hoberman.
Calm down.
Paid by the syllable.
This is why I don't read the Village Voice.
Jay Hoberman. Among detractors, Rex Reed of the New York Observer said that it was the worst film he had seen in 2001, calling it, quote, a load of moronic and incoherent garbage. And New York, Peter Rayner observed, although I like it more than some of the other Dreamtime Freak Fests, it's still a pretty morbid ride. Lynch needs to renew himself with an influx of the deep feeling he has for people, for outcasts, and lay off the cretins and hobgoblins and zombies for a while. Okay.
I don't think I've never seen a hobgoblin in a...
Or a zombie. Nary a cretin.
Well, it's filled with cretins.
Well, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the film does have some accolades. However, at the Academy Awards, David Lynch was nominated for Best Director, but he lost to Ron Howard for A Beautiful Mind.
Okay. In Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Director, Best Actress, Best Music, and Best Action Thriller Adventure Film, but lost to Memento.
It didn't win anything.
So. No, it didn't. It didn't win anything.
But Best Director for this movie, I think, is good for Lynch. You know?
Should we talk about the lack of accolades, right? I liked that the Saturn Awards did acknowledge Naomi Watts, but I feel like the Academy Awards should have, because the things she has to do in this movie are just basically everything. She has to do everything. This whole movie is on Naomi Watts' back, and it looks effortless.
That's right. And this was the very first time that I ever remember seeing Naomi Watts and being really struck by her. And you know, now, post Mulholland Drive, you know, she's still a really popular and a very talented actress who has gotten lots of work. And I think that this movie really like put her on the map.
Well, it's just interesting because it's like not many roles you can just give someone to like a portfolio, right? Like this is a portfolio. She can act like an innocent. She can act like a druggy bitch. She can act like an asshole. And then she can act like a rising starlet or whatever. All of this stuff that she's doing, she's acting within acting in this movie, right? She has to do that sort of thing. And so it's tough, right? And she was not a household name.
At all. I mean, she's Australian, right? So
no, she's British.
She's British.
Yeah. But her first big role, I think, was before this, and it was in an Australian movie. But I don't remember what that was called. But before this, she was in Tank Girl as Jet Girl, and she was in Children of the Corn 4, The Gathering. We all remember that role. And after this, of course, her career really kicked off, right? So like the Ring series, King Kong, The Painted Veil, which no one's seen, but I fucking love.
I haven't seen it.
The music, it's a dream project for her and Edward Norton. Mm-hmm. And so they made it together, and it's just wonderful. It's about cholera. Anyway, J. Edgar, The Impossible, which is another great film, in my opinion. Diana, Birdman, and Goodnight Mommy most recently. Although, sadly, didn't get a wide release because I thought it was pretty good.
Well, there was an Amazon movie, so it went straight to streaming. But
basically every horror remake.
Yeah, so if there is an American version of a foreign film, they go to Naomi Watts.
She must have passed it for quarantine, or she was too old. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, they probably were just like, we've already seen you enough. And then once they made the movie, like, damn, I wish we had Naomi Watts.
Yeah.
She was good in Goodnight Mommy. And she's excellent.
She's good in everything.
She really is.
She's like a workhorse. I don't know why she doesn't get even more work, but she has a great filmography at this point. She's a great career. And she's married to Billy Crudup.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. She's making the talk show rounds right now, talking about her first time having sex with him.
As one does.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Is he British too?
No, I think he's American.
That's what I thought. Okay. But no, I really appreciate when there's a lot of genre work under someone's, filmography.
God, watch him be Canadian and me getting another ribbing.
Oh my God. We
Damn
apologize.
it, I'm so sorry, Canadian Matt.
To whatever country Billy Crudup is from, we're sorry for not knowing that or recognizing your country. There, we did it. But no, she's great. And we've talked about her on the podcast before, obviously.
Yeah.
So I always like seeing them.
My favorite acting moment for her still remains the Bambi. The Bambi scene in Ring 2.
That's fucking dear. But the best performance from Ring 2 was the screaming video cassette.
Recorded by Naomi Watts, yeah. Laura Haring as, Haring as Rita, or Camila Rhodes, right? So before this, she was in Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out.
Wow.
All these, getting their horror start. And then Exit to Eden, and then she was also on General Hospital. And after this, she was in Willard, The Punisher, with the guy from The Mist, Thomas Jane. Yeah. Inland Empire. So she worked with
Lynch again.
One Missed Call, Gossip Girl, and The Shield for TV, but never really picked up after the early mid thousands into a larger film career than that.
Yeah, and this is not someone that I, even having seen this movie before.
She's very striking in this movie.
She is.
My goodness.
She's beautiful, but I do not remember seeing her, and I've seen most of these movies.
Yeah.
So she's good in this.
Not super memorable.
No. Pretty, but forgettable.
Oh. She does a good job in this movie. I wouldn't know her from, I don't remember. I've seen like most of those movies. I don't remember her at all.
I certainly don't remember her from Exit to Eden.
And even like I asked you during, I was like, I think I've seen her before. And you're like, it's Jean Triplehorn or something like that.
She looks like Jeanine Triplehorn. Like she just does. But that was a joke, obviously.
That's the name I remember.
And we just started thinking
speaking
about
of
Jeanine Triplehorn.
The who's who of who's that from the 2000s. Justin Theroux.
It is so funny that you would say that, because that's exactly what I was thinking while watching this movie. I was just like, this cast is like the who's who of like just random people. But you're right, Justin Theroux fits into that category.
Adam Kesher, right? Before this, he was in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. The Broken Hearts Club, which I didn't remember him from, but he's kind of like the nerdy gay. And I love that movie. It's so early and ahead of its time.
I love the really Broken Hearts Club.
Great cast too. And then of course he was in American Psycho. And after this he was in Zoolander 2 as like evil DJ or whatever. And then he was I think he was the Irish guy in Charlie's Angels Full Throttle.
Yep.
With like all of the abs and shit. Like crazy. Anyway. And then Beetlejuice just recently.
He's in a lot of things.
Which I didn't realize was him.
I haven't seen that yet. So
he's a little chameleonic.
He is in an HBO series that I really, really like called The Leftovers.
Okay.
And I like Justin Theroux. I think, and not really because of his acting.
I like, it's really because of his last name. I like how it's spelled.
Theroux. Well, there's an accent. Theroux. He's good in this too. He's funny in this movie. Like, I don't know, I like his hair.
He's good. Yeah. He's supposed to play stereotypical director. Mid-career director and,
full of himself.
Hired director, we've got Ann Miller as Coco, or Adam's mom, and she was in, like, way back in the day, I guess, You Can't Take It With You. So she's supposed to represent old Hollywood, and she does represent old Hollywood, and she's great.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get that vibe from her, especially when she's playing the role of Coco in this movie. You kind of get the idea of, like, someone who used to be involved in, like, old Hollywood movies and now who owns this.
She has connections. She gave Naomi Watts her script or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And so she is like the representative of what could happen like after your Hollywood career ends or whatever. It doesn't mean that she's any less fabulous. She's just not in movies anymore.
She owns some beautiful Spanish style Los Angeles apartments.
Oh, that's where I totally would live.
I'm in number 12. 17. Dan Hedaya as Vincenzo Castiglione. I don't know how to say that. He's like the mob lawyer, right? But I always love him whenever he shows up. He pops up all over the place, right? He was in Clueless as Cher's dad, Alien Resurrection as the captain of the ship, I guess, and First Wives Club. I think he was the husband of Bette Midler in that. Mm-hmm. Every time he shows up, I think he's great. I think he knows exactly who he is and like what he can play, and he's great at subtle comedy.
The thing is, every time I see Dan Hedaya, he looks funny. Like he looks like he's like not paying attention. Like this is the way his face looks to me. Mm. You know what I mean? And so I'm always expecting him to play a comedic role like in everything that he does, but he doesn't always. So.
No. We've also got Mark Pellegrino, and the only reason I'm mentioning him is because I think he has an interesting filmography, mostly on TV. He plays the hitman in this, and he's he's like bumbling or whatever, and near the end he's a little bit less bumbling because that's not the dream. Mm-hmm. But he plays kind of the good or like almost like a Jesus-like character in Lost. Like kind of pseudo supernatural, and then in Supernatural he played Lucifer. Mm-hmm. So kind of he's able to do both those types of roles. He's good at playing mystery, and he kind of has that face and line delivery and such, but he can play both sides, and I think that's really interesting about that actor.
And I think in this particular movie he does his dual roles like really well, right? Well, it's the same role, just a different version of it, but like that moment where he's bumbling that hit job is just so fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Like it's funny. It's completely unexpected in this movie. And the first time I watched it, I was guffawing with laughter when he shot that woman.
I was going to say it's hilarious in the way that I wasn't laughing, but I was kind of like amused.
Yeah, I thought it was funny when he walks in there. She's like, something beat me real bad.
Yeah, I think that would have been like a theater watch. When people are laughing, we laugh with them. There's also a bunch of other people, right? Which is like Robert Forster, James Karen, a Poltergeist fan, and now Billy Ray Cyrus is also in this.
Finally we get to see him in film. We're finally talking about Billy Ray Cyrus.
I came across this weird article that was like David Lynch invented Hannah Montana. It was like Billy Ray Cyrus's acting career with David Lynch created the duality that is Hannah Montana. I'm like, shut the fuck up.
God, this is why I don't Google David Lynch, because I don't want to reach.
No, I think that was from Googling Billy Ray Cyrus and David Lynch together.
Also a mistake. Billy Ray Cyrus in this movie. What a fine acting job he did. I mean, he delivers lines just the way I would expect him to. Robert Forster, though, is like also like good old Hollywood.
Yeah, he played a detective in this.
Yeah, I like him. But yeah, I mean, it's a good cast.
Very random. And that's why we kind of went into it. Like normally I'd like to just have the cast as a reference, right? But this cast is definitely notable just for how random and yet very specific and intentional that it is.
Yes. And that's the thing I feel with David Lynch and Mulholland Drive is that everything in here is done with a purpose and a reason.
Yeah.
And he is not talking about it. And I think that's fine, because
there are no accidents. Yeah.
He made the movie he wanted to make and everything was by choice, and everyone's like, but what does it mean though? And he was like,
uncompromising.
Go and figure it out for yourself. I mean, that's what a good director should do anyway. Like, here, I've made this piece of film and I'm putting it out into the world. Like, what I think doesn't matter. It's what you think that matters. And being tight-lipped, after this film was released was a good thing on his part, but everything is so intentional, including the casting.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we need to talk about the themes and tropes, continuing a conversation from Blue Velvet, where we talked about kind of the overarching Lynchian, like noir stuff, the duality, lost innocence and trauma, that runs its way through to this movie still, but it has it's definitely its own really specific identity.
It does. But the thing is that like Lost Innocence is kind of a through line for Lynchian films. So
yes.
Yeah. And this one is no different. So,
yeah, and the tagline for this movie, again, is a love story in the city of dreams, right? Which is kind of a spoiler in a way.
Yeah. I mean, because this movie definitely has a theme about, what it means to have like aspirations in Hollywood or stardom and fame and to be an actor. And
yeah. Obviously, this film has opinions and themes surrounding Hollywood as a meat grinder for dreams and wish fulfillment, despair, and more wrapped in a package of neo-noir and abstract storytelling.
Which is a good way to talk about Hollywood. I mean, if you're going to talk about Hollywood, talk about it from a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah, it's like Lynch's La La Land.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. But this movie is just as much about Hollywood as it is about these two women, right? And it's about the film industry, and it's about like the difficulties in making movies and how everyone has kind of their fingers in your career and sort of like pushing you in one direction or another.
Yeah. Or that you have no control, seemingly sometimes. Like it's all up to the powers that be, or that's the feeling of it anyway, certainly in your early career when you're trying to break into things. And I think that's part of this, right? But we did mention that David Lynch, just as of note, again, has never confirmed or denied anything that people's analyzation has uncovered, seemingly, about this movie, because there's a lot of discussion and interpretations about this movie. Although, Justin Theroux, I found a quote from him that was pretty good. He said, I think he's genuinely happy for it to mean anything you want it to mean. He loves it when people come up with really bizarre interpretations. David works from his subconscious.
And that's what any good surrealist writer or director or artist would do, right? It feels dreamlike because it comes from someone else's subconscious. And that's the thing, is that like interpretation, as I've said before on this podcast, is like inherently selfish. It's what you want it to be. And as long as you can come up with a decent argument that fits the narrative, then it's not a wrong answer.
Right.
You know?
This is more of an art piece. That's why there's art in the title, right? Because with like Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, he'll answer questions.
Sure.
Right. With this one, he absolutely would not.
And I think that's good. I think that, I mean, also like
it's his Rorschach, you know.
This movie was made like much later in his career, and he didn't make very many movies after this, really. But you know, and his filmography like really isn't huge.
Well, I just feel like he really, like I said, there's a through line here. He really kind of tapped into what he wanted to tell and show to the world from his own subconscious and experience with Blue Velvet, you know, and the long form version of that with Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And then I feel like this is kind of a culmination of that. And so in a way, he kind of shot his wad.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a really good way to put it, because maybe he did, you know, he finally got to have a film that he's like, all right, I'm not going to explain this one to anybody. This is it. You know, I don't think this is his opus in any kind of a way, but like the biggest movie that he made after this was Inland Empire. And that was just like a 3-hour fever dream that I don't know many people have actually seen. So I haven't seen it. It's the one missing piece from his filmography.
The Dern is in it.
The Dern is in it.
Laura Dern.
It looks crazy, but it's also about filmmaking in some kind of a way. So I feel like maybe he just got burned a little bit, and his subconscious was telling him to make movies about Hollywood in some kind of a way.
Yeah, maybe, because at some point that was his new experience for the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
By the time he made that, you know?
Chris and I were talking off mic a little bit ago, and I said that this movie is like the most straightforward surrealist like experience. And I think it feels straightforward because you're able to assign whatever meaning you want to everything in this movie. Like, again, like there's not a wrong answer. So
yeah. Well, okay. Let's start talking about the movie itself and its meaning, rather than just like the through lines and connections and talking about his career. Let's zoom back in from the 1,000-foot view, because I think that overall this film skirts the line of the dreaded, you know, it was all a dream trope. And we're going to ask that question. We're going to bookend this conversation with that question of, you know, was this all a dream? Was it a dream? You know, but like Blue Velvet, there's a fantasy role play aspect to this film, at least in my opinion, you know, by the would-be protagonist. It's like Lynch is trying to make the same movie over and over in iterations in order to perfect what he seems determined to get out of his head and onto the screen. Like we've said, you know, between Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks, you know, A Lost Highway, a couple of those others, right? And in order to do so, it seems like Lynch really had to lean into the dreamlike qualities of his storytelling here, emphasizing surrealism without ever going fully abstract.
right.
You know, this can give some critics a sense that he can't commit to a genre or tone and cause some frustrations with meaning and even basic storytelling in this movie or movies like it. I'm looking at you, Vanilla Sky, Brazil, Jacob's Ladder, Perfect Blue, right? To varying degrees, right? And so like a lot of the reaction to this is going to be subjective, although based on our Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic scores, it did fairly well in that regard.
It certainly did. And what I'm most shocked about by that tomato score is the audience reaction to this. It seems like a movie that the audience would turn their back on.
I would like to see like what the Rotten Tomatoes score would have been like in 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be as high.
I would agree with that, you know, because when I watched this for the first time in 2001, I mean, I watched it at home. I didn't see it in the theater because, I mean, 66 screens, it probably wasn't anywhere near me. And I liked it, you know, but pretty much any other person that I knew who had seen this movie within my circle of friends or whatever did not. They actively did not like it.
There was much more of a debate, you know, and there's like especially back then, there was a real like, you know, he's a filmmaker's filmmaker, you know, like, and if you don't like it, you don't get it, you know? And it's like now that everyone's like posthumously, of course, in the club, you know, they feel like they're on the right side of history now. It's hard to kind of parse some of these older movies. It's 25 years old and it's still this millennium. It's so weird.
Oh my God.
Kill me. You know, which led to, I think, a lot of overanalysis, you know, versus like the actual meanings that are buried in this movie.
I feel like Lynch films all suffer from some sort of overanalysis at some point. I mean, like everyone's got an opinion and everyone's got something to say about it.
But especially Lisa. I mean, this movie.
But especially Mulholland Drive. So you are correct. I think that for every person who has seen this movie, there is an analysis happening.
Yeah. So people really get into this and go so far as to dip into science fiction and call this, parallel universes or alternate realities or even time loops. I think like one person was like, it's a Mobius strip of time. I'm like, shut the fuck up.
They did not use the phrase
said Mobius strip. Yes.
Oh, motherfucker. Who the fuck is that? If you wrote that and you're listening, I need you to call our hotline.
He's going to bully you, nerd.
It's a Mobius strip. Okay. Again, I just said that interpretation is inherently selfish.
Mobius is my favorite word.
And you can you can say things, right? I feel like parallel universes, alternate realities, and time loops goes a little too far.
And their favorite film is probably Morbius. Anyway.
I need to open up this discussion truly. Hold on. We're going to be talking about Mobius.
I'll give you a Mobius strip.
Cite your source. I need to find this person.
While I do think there's some folks who are really getting carried away with the interpretations of the film, I do think that it's, some of it's fair considering some of Lynch's other work, especially Twin Peaks. But you could argue that these are, fractures of a broken mirror of the one true reality of the story, which is kind of where my interpretation aligns.
Okay. I am very interested in what your interpretation is. So tell me.
Yeah, I am too. As far as like what your reaction to it is, because again, this is kind of a Rorschach. And I feel like some of this is fairly obvious, which is probably why, it's as like on its surface, fairly inaccessible. But the more you think about it, I feel like, I don't know, especially if you're used to critical analysis or film analysis or literary analysis, if you're a fan of film and meaning and things like that. Anyway, so we start off with the jitterbug, which is, to me, a metaphor for competition in Hollywood, also an old-fashioned idea of Hollywood. It also could be all these things, right? Entry into a drug-induced dream state by our protagonist. I feel like this is one of the most opaque visual storytelling beats in the entire film, and it opens with it. And I'm pretty sure I fucking hate it. Yeah. It looks bad, like doesn't feel right. It's the most abstract of all of it. And I'm just glad it gets it out of the way.
It does go on and on and on forever. I also don't like it. I like this movie quite a bit. I've only seen it twice. This was the first time you watched it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I completely had forgotten that it opened with this whole jitterbug moment. And so as we're sitting there watching it, I was like, oh God, I remember. Like it's my least favorite part of this movie. And I think you're right. I feel like it is a metaphor for competition in Hollywood. I think you could easily argue that, but even just at its surface later on in the movie, when we are talking to Diane Selwyn, she's like, I want a jitterbug competition. So, it is kind of like an entry into a dream state. You know what I mean? Because the movie opens with that, someone falling asleep.
Yep, someone going
and crash.
And then it's the fade, right? Yeah. And then our story starts. And then we get into these interesting relationships, with Betty, who is a constructed character of her best view of herself, right? And you can kind of see in the negative spaces of this film what relationships really were in reality by the way they weren't in the dream. And of course, you don't know what you're watching as it's happening. This is only in hindsight upon analyzing the film that you understand this, because at the beginning, I'm thinking oh, the direction is horrible. These actors are being told to smile constantly, and they're being told to act in a certain way, like George Lucas levels of line delivery. And I'm just like, what is going on? But I understand after the fact that they were told to, that those smiles were supposed to be a little creepy, because it's like this woman could not understand her grandparents, right? As they're dropping her off at the airport and being so supportive and so happy and excited for her to start her career in Hollywood. She couldn't actually understand them being supportive or happy at all, which is why it seemed so forced.
Are they her grandparents?
Her parents or her grandparents, someone. Right?
I thought it was just people she met on the plane. Because they were like, it's so nice to meet you or something like
really?
that. Or maybe misheard that. But I mean, we're talking about the older people that she's at the airport with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a relationship there, of course, because later on, it's like they're overly happy and supportive. Like the forced smiles. This is Diane's first, flip on reality. Later, we see them kind of haunting her or even coming after her. It seems like there's some level of judgment and expectation there that she can't fully escape. Either way, in the dream, whether she met them or not, I believe those are her real parental figures.
Yes.
Right. Either way. Right. And that's the first big twist on reality in her dream or wish fulfillment.
And it's also a really good symbol of like, in that moment, because they're wishing her well, and maybe we'll see you on the big screen someday. And she's like, I sure hope so. And she's like, just filled with optimism, and that is a complete like switch from who Diane Selwyn is at the time. Right.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. I love the smiles and the overacting because that's what a dream is. Right.
Right. And as soon as she's away from them, they just turn into these like smiling automatons, almost like from like the Smile franchise.
That's right. They are clearly possessed by that demon or whatever the fuck. But yeah, they're sitting in their car, just driving in silent in a limo, actually. And they have like the creepiest fucking smiles on there. And that's like part of when you're watching a fucking Lynch movie. If it just seems like a dream in general, that's his aesthetic. And this movie really kind of sets up this like dreamlike quality, but you're right. Everything about the rest of this movie has to be looked at in hindsight only.
Right. Because it's not super accessible as it folds out in front of you.
Correct.
Right. And because he wants you to experience it kind of like it's a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not just seeing it, with like the death vignette of the white, fade around the edge of the screen to where you obviously know the character's dreaming, right? That's not what he was going for. Enter Rita though, right? Which is the damsel in distress. And she's basically a puppet. She, that Betty can do whatever she wants with. She can save her. She can have her romantic story, but Rita's an empty shell. She doesn't quite work, even in the fantasy, it's not quite reciprocated, right? Her feelings of love for each other.
That's right. Because, when they have their big sexy sex moment in this movie and Betty asked her, like, have you done this before? And she said, I don't know, so like. Right.
And then she's like, I love you. And then she's like, I'm falling in love with you. And it's like, almost like she's asking her to repeat it to her, back to her. And the puppet can't do it. The puppet's just a blank slate. She's just like, huh.
That's right. She's whatever you want to fill her brain with,
Yeah.
And that's the thing is I love that moment in this movie, in that exchange, just because she says like, have you done this before? And she's like, I don't know. And she asked back, have you? And she was like, well, I want to do it with you, so it doesn't matter. I mean, we can assume that we're talking about having a same sex moment.
Yeah. And I think she's putting herself in this light where it's like, they're both innocents in a way, she stripped away everything that she hated about this woman by giving her amnesia, essentially, and then she gets to have her all for herself in the way that she wants, but she's kind of coming to find out that it's a little bit soulless. I think it's not super fulfilling.
And it was. I mean, so if you're gonna look at this movie sort of like as a dream, right? And so dreams would be like a heightened take on the reality that you've already experienced, right? She's sort of creating a relationship with Rita that she did not have with Camilla, or that she thought that she did, but Camilla seems very, very Hollywood, and she's with people for whatever they can provide to her in the moment or whatever. And that's just not who Diane Selwyn is.
Yep. So. And also she wants to save her. She has this constructed in the dream where she is able to kind of Nancy Drew with her, what happened to her in the accident and everything else, out of the guilt for having her killed, which we find out later that she did, or at least it's super heavily alluded to.
I think we can assume that she had her killed completely because it was completed, with the key and all that stuff.
Yeah. The blue key signifies that the job is done if she finds the blue key or whatever.
Right.
And of course, in the dream, there's a much more like dream-like, weird, like Fisher Price version of the key.
Like the key's discovery. And
then
what
they
does
find
that
the
mean?
box, from the box, the blue box.
And the box is what sort of ends the dream.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. We'll get to that soon enough. But also in this adventure on the Yellow Brick Road of Lynch's Wizard of Oz is the Freudian characters, right? The director, the hitman, the cowboy, and then the man from the diner.
And it's so apt to use like a Freudian analysis when it comes to movies that are about dreams, right? Because that's who fucking Freud is. So,
well, yeah, and you can ascribe these people like so almost really easily to these, like the cowboy as the superego, right? Moral authority and judgment.
100%.
Yeah. The director as ego, who's struggling for control. And when the two meet, it's super apparent that there's a feeling of fate, or that despite all effort, success is determined by unseen powerful forces. Forces we've seen are almost cartoonish stereotypes, like the mob and the man in the empty dark room calling the shots over like the phone or the walkie-talkie or whatever the fuck,
That's right.
Also, there's another kind of duality to this where there's like a wish fulfillment that the director is inept because he's the one that gets, her lover.
That's right. He has stolen her lover, like really right in front of her eyes.
Yeah, and he's the one that gets cheated on in the dream and walks in on, and he gets beat up by the person that's like cheating on his wife with, and then he loses his movie and loses control. So it's like everything that's kind of mirroring her own story, but also things that she wants to happen to this character because he's the one that's stolen her lover, Camellia away.
I like that. I think the director really is considered ego if you're going to look at all these things. Even more apparent than that, though, is the cowboy as super ego, and not just super ego for Diane Selwyn, but seemingly super ego for every other character that he sort of interacts with, right? Because he's clearly the super ego as far as Diane goes, because he comes and tells her to wake up at some point. He's like, hey, it's time to wake up now. And that's the whole point of how that works inside your brain and personality. So I love it. I think it's neat.
I agree. We also have the diner man, who to me is the id. Raw fear and repression. I feel like his character was cast and acted as someone who seems particularly neurotic or even pathetic, right? And I know that in reality they kind of locked eyes. So he came from someone she just happened to see and kind of placed herself and her own kind of fears and everything else in. And on the other side of that coin of the id is the violence and chaos of the hitman, right? This is especially evident by her dream's interpretation of him as an accident-prone and incompetent, a judgment of herself for wishing revenge and death on her would-be lesbian lover.
Well, that's right. And I think that it's also kind of a way for her to think like maybe it didn't happen. Yeah, she has the key, but if she in her dream have created a hitman that's so bumbling that maybe he couldn't get the job done completely, right?
Almost wish fulfillment in a way too.
Exactly.
So there's like layers of meaning here. Also, we have the homeless person, which is not so Freudian as it is just kind of the idea of death. Right. Both literally and also as the feared end of her career in Hollywood, right? So there's a layer to that as well, being homeless on the street, not being able to go home.
Well, and also because they go out of their way to make him kind of scary.
Or her.
And this character it's there. It's always there. We see it several other times in the movie, right? And it's always hidden behind something. It's kind of lurking in the shadows, and it's always there. It's there behind you.
Or it's in the dark alley, and it has its own little sack of bullshit that it carries around. But inside that sack is the blue box, which we later find out is death.
And the end of Dream. I think it's really, really interesting to take this Freudian aspect and look at it, just because of, the way that things are represented in a dream state from all these different characters, but also like dreams are filled with symbolism, right? And there are just tons and tons of symbols in this movie.
Yeah.
And some are super obvious and some maybe not so much. And that's what makes a good symbol anyway. But
yeah. And then it kind of, I want to say, culminates or crescendos with like Club Silencio, right? With the unrequited love. There's like, it just goes into full throttle dream. Her subconscious is telling herself that none of this is real again and again. Like, this is all recorded. None of this is actually happening. And like,
yeah,
and then like the song of unrequited love that's in Spanish, but not quite like understandable from emotional level, but not quite from like a literal sense because it's not their spoken language,
It's understandable from a performance level only,
Oh, yeah.
And because there's no subtitles. And I mean, it's a famous song, but
Yeah.
you're right. You're right about a lot of things in this too, because it's more than just her subconscious telling her that none of this is real. It's our own conscious at that point telling us that what we've seen in the movie so far is not real, because this is the most dreamlike this movie gets up until that point.
Yep.
And then from then it kind of turns and we see that no, there is an actual reality that's happening outside of the story that we've seen for the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
So
It's also hard to kind of draw a line of where analyzation begins and overanalyzation starts, you know? And I don't know, like I think about all the different aspects. Everything has intentional, right? And I think of number 12, right? The X, right? And she had the detectives line, right? So it's like the X to me, well, first of all, I think that's the X, right? I don't think it's not like, you know, they switched apartments. I think they switched girlfriends, right? Like they broke up, you know, and they're acting like it's a breakup. Like, oh, I just want to get the last of my stuff, right?
Yep.
So it's not like they switched. They just got a different apartment. They separated, right? And then she's also the one that tells her at the end, like the detectives are looking for you again, right? So it's a throwaway line, but it also tells her that she's like kind of nearing the end of her road, right? That there are more than emotional repercussions for what she's done. There's also going to be life ones. Like everything is done. Everything is coming to an end, and kind of shows us why, in a way, in hindsight at least, that she basically goes to suicide.
yeah, that's true. And I mean, because she obviously, like within the dream, everything with Rita and Betty seems like a very novice experience. She's an ingenue even when it comes to sexual relations, right? Because she's like, I don't know, I want to do it with you. When we get to the real world, we kind of understand that she's got other people, other lovers that she has been with, right?
Yeah.
And I think we know that it's an actual ex, because you're right. She comes to get some of the things that she left in that apartment, but she's still using them. She's like, is that my ashtray kind of thing? And like, you know, a casual person you just switched an apartment with, you're not going to use their stuff. You're just going to hold it for them. But like, we know that there's something else going on between those two characters, and you don't have to explain too much of it.
Yeah.
Right?
And the reason I was saying, if you haven't watched the movie, number 12 is the apartment number 12.
Yeah, the other lady.
When they were dancing.
Her 12th lover.
Nancy Drewing. Her 12th lover, and then she goes to the 17. I don't know the meaning between 12 and 17, if there is any.
Probably not.
I don't care. Obviously, the blue key is, you know, the job's done, but also in the dream. The box itself, as soon as she opens the box, it goes into a black nothingness of a void, which is the end of Camila's story. It's her death, right? And then that's when kind of we go back. We kind of jackknife back into reality from there.
Pretty quickly. And well, I mean, immediately. And then things seem very, very different and very, very real. The movie really switches like gears and becomes something completely different for the last like half hour.
I want to say almost like a third, right? Like, and I feel like in hindsight, like, is this all supposed to be a dream, or is it actually kind of like her personal kind of hell as she's dying? Because at the beginning we see the pillow and the fade out, like someone's going to sleep, right? But at the end, it seems like she actually abruptly goes to her pillow and then shoots herself. And that's the body that she discovers in the dream, which looked eerily familiar or whatever, right? Because it's herself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it could be either one.
It's almost like Dickensian, like, you know, Scrooge, like going through the beats to understand her own life, you know, after she's dead herself in a way. But I don't know.
I like to think of
and
it
who
as,
cares, really?
I mean, either way is a good interpretation. I like to think of it as a dream only because like there are certain things that pop out, like telling someone to wake up.
On the other side of the story is a story, right? And so on the other side of that is her death or the ramifications of it, you know, of what she's done, which is the end of her career and jail, essentially.
That's right. And I mean, and also when you think about dreams, it really is just the way that your brain processes the information that you already have within it, right? And like, we don't dream about things that we haven't seen before. Like, we can't create a face in our dream. We've seen it somewhere, just like she saw the diner man, right? And like, I don't want to get too into overanalysis since I've already called someone out on saying Mobius strip. But like, I think that when you're watching a film like this or reading a novel that's kind of surrealist like this, that I think it's really easy just to get started and get carried away, but only because there are lots of layers, like you said before, to analyze and uncover.
Yeah, I mean, someone in the diner was wearing like a green tie, which I think was symbolizing like the fields of Elysium, you know? And it's like,
There you go, exactly. You know, it's just like, but I've been in classroom situations where people start doing that, and then like I try really hard not to roll my eyes directly in their face, but I will, you know, and like sometimes symbols and interpretation are best when they're like just easy to explain, and then you just accept the story and what's there.
yeah. Well, immediately after finishing this movie, I was like, okay, if your movie has to have a literal mystery box to work, you may have made a film that's slightly too inaccessible. Also, one thing that I'm seeing is audience reviews, like especially on Letterboxd, where they hated the film until they did their own research or listened to like a YouTuber or someone else's write-up on it, and then they got it, it clicked for them, and all of a sudden they liked it. You know, like zooming out at these reviews, it seemed like they didn't like it until they consumed another's explanations or meanings of the movie. And they didn't like it until they felt like they got into the exclusive club, you know, of understanding it, which I'm not sure is legitimately liking a film. I know that for me, I feel like I actually enjoyed thinking about this movie and analyzing it and studying it more than I did actually watching it.
But the difference between you and some of these other people, though, is that while watching the movie, you were already putting pieces together. You didn't have to have someone else's interpretation to truly like understand.
It took me a bit.
And that's fine. It's okay to walk away from a movie and think about it, you know, but I think sometimes it's best to come up with your own conclusions on things.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like film, like Green Knight, all that stuff I love, you know, like, you know, if it's accessible enough or if it's not too, you know, buried in its or up its own ass, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that can be subjective. Where that line is different for most people, you know, but I don't know, like for you, you're more skilled at like literary interpretations of things. And, you know, like maybe you got it more in real time as you watched the movie. For me, not as much. I knew only as the ending was happening. And it ended so abruptly that I like basically started laughing, you know, and only now do I kind of appreciate how it ended and thought, oh yeah, naturally it ends that way because that's where the story ends. Mm-hmm. But when I'm watching it, I was just like, what the fuck, you know? And I just have to remember that my initial, like, I did not really enjoy myself watching this movie. I was entertained. I was never bored, you know, but I enjoyed thinking about it more than I did. And maybe that's an achievement of itself. And maybe that's the art piece that's missing from most films. Like, I don't need an explosion in a minute, you know, like an MCU film to enjoy it. You know, obviously I'm a fan of things like Green Knight, but you know, and I love me a fucking epic. I just watched the Mission, fucking loved it. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm trying to say, like, I like my movies to be a little bit more understandable emotionally at the time of the watch.
And I get that. And I think that is, I think if you're talking about David Lynch as a whole, I think that is what most people would say why they don't like David Lynch, right? Is that, you know, like it's too difficult to lose yourself and watch a movie and enjoy the entertainment value of a movie if you're trying to have to piece everything together and figure out exactly what's being said.
It's like, I don't want to give myself so much credit for finally figuring it out, you know, ascribing my own meaning to something and then getting a dopamine hit for like solving the math problem and then thinking I'm part of some exclusive club and that's why I like it or say I like it. I don't want to be that person. I want to be more self-aware.
But again, there's a difference though. I mean, so like if you're watching a movie and something just like sort of like clicks,
yeah,
and even after the movie's ended, you know, there's a difference between like saying, okay, I understand the movie from what my experience with it was.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm clever, but I'm not super smart.
Yes, you are. Whatever. I mean, like, and also there's a difference between like, so the Green Knight is based on a source material that requires a little bit of research to truly understand, you know. In this movie and in Lynch in general, I feel like having your own interpretation is most important. And if people don't get anything from the movie, but they do get something from someone else's like interpretation of it, well, that's basically the study of literature since literature was created. You know, it's okay to do that.
Yeah, and it's okay to challenge your audiences to, you know, do some heavy lifting, you know,
yes.
which is rare and I'm not used to it. And it exercises a muscle, you know, that I'm not super used to, especially these days where it's all about the lowest common denominator and franchises and everything else.
Which to me is boring, you know. I mean, I do like mindless entertainment.
Oh, me too.
And I also love movies that make me think. I don't think I need to think as hard as I do when watching a Lynch movie. Like sometimes just a little bit of thinking is fine.
Well, yeah, and I can get it, right? And I will get it, but I can't do long division while I'm watching the thing.
No, I mean, like watching a David Lynch film, watching Mulholland Drive, I think specifically requires you to walk away from the movie and think about it for a little bit. Right.
Yeah. And it kind of annoyed me because I was angry at it. And it annoyed me how much I was thinking about it. But that's one thing about Lynch I keep hearing as well, which is like people cannot help themselves but kind of think about them.
That's right.
Which is kind of his point. He doesn't almost care. He has no opinion on whether you enjoy it or not, so much as if it had an effect on you and made you think. That's right. You know, and it's like just one of those things, like if you're going to stop in the Louvre at a painting for more than the typical 10 seconds, the artist will have won, you know, and that's exactly what Lynch has achieved here.
And this is something, again, we were talking about off mic tonight, is this like, I think that that's a very Lynchian quality, is that, you know, you can't escape David Lynch's work once you've seen it. Like it will always be with you. Something will remind you.
There'll always be something stuck in your craw.
That's right. And that thing stuck in your craw might accidentally come loose at some point, and then you've got it. Too many times I think about Twin Peaks still, you know, I'm just like, oh, you know, like something will pop into my head and I'm like, okay, well, I guess what that means or whatever, you know? And I think that the more that you like have seen his work, you know, or anybody in general, really, like the easier it is to sort of like watch in the moment. Because when watching Mulholland Drive for the first time in 2001, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to expect. But once we got to the last parts of the movie, I was like, okay, so she had a dream, you know, and now we're seeing what really happened, you know, and then I'll see some people say like, I had no idea what was going on. I feel like it's kind of accessible. I think that it's maybe more accessible than some of his other movies.
In hindsight.
That are less, you know, but I like this movie a lot more than some of his other work.
Just, I would urge people to remember how you felt your first time watching this, you know, and then remember that, you know, so that you can kind of preserve that, you know, so it doesn't blend into the next time and the next time. Because now that I've analyzed it, now that I've understood it, eventually I will return to this film. I do have an interest to do so, to understand it with, you know, the things that I've analyzed. Again, like watching it with those fresh eyes that kind of understand it better, you know, and I think I'll get even more, you know, but it's going to take some time, you know, and I just want people to like remember their first time so that they can appreciate the contrast.
I mean, it took me 25 years to watch it again. So,
you know, and this is why we do deep dives, right? This films like this, especially, right? Because we don't want to do you dirty and just, you know, this was not a dirt dive, goddammit. We got into fucking Freud.
That's right. We had a psychoanalysis interpretation of Mulholland Drive, and you are welcome.
Nah, I'm tired.
But before you get too sleepy, we have some questions to ask about Mulholland Drive. Is it a horror movie?
Just like Blue Velvet, I would say very adjacently.
Very. I think that it's hard to make a movie that has like really dreamlike qualities and dreamlike characters and situations without calling it at least horror adjacent. And people love to say that Wilkie's moment is a jump scare.
The very edge. It's the dust ruffle of the horror genre.
You're so gay. It's the sham. Were you scared while watching Mulholland Drive?
It's a duvet of horror. No. And also this was supposed to have like one of the biggest jump scares. It's been on multiple lists for like the biggest jump scares in history. It never, ever has affected me that way, even in isolation or in watching the whole scene play out. But I know that I might be a minority there.
It's not a jump scare for me, but I feel like the moments leading up to the reveal are fairly tense. Like the first time that I watched this movie, I was just like, what the fuck are we going to see?
Just like that super long fucking Tarantino style monologue, only to deal with like the only thing this scene is telling us is that this thing is death. And he has died, right? And even then, it's only like alluding that the guy died. You don't know. He could just having a heart attack, go to the hospital and be fine. You never know.
It doesn't matter. Really.
That doesn't matter, yeah, because it's Lynch.
That's true. I love it. That's just going to enter our lexicon now. It doesn't matter.
What did you have for Lynch?
Wilkie's.
A dumpster dove into a death dumpster.
What did you rate Mulholland Drive?
I rated it a 3.
A 3.
Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed thinking about this film, analyzing it, more than I did actually watching it. Now, that rating is a first-time watch rating. So the next time I watch, when I feel like I'm part of the exclusive club, I'll probably rate it higher because I'll get the dopamine hit of, feeling
like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did it. You did it.
Understanding this movie makes me want to diddle my skittle.
I gave this movie 3.5. I feel like if Letterboxd existed when I was watching this movie in my 20s, I probably would have rated it higher. It's not a bad movie. I think it's a really good movie. The performances are great. I feel like this is like quintessential David Lynch. Like compared to other films that I've seen of his, I think this is one of his better ones. Right. But it's not quite Blue Velvet for me. I think Blue Velvet's a better movie. And I think that this one is good for other reasons. Oh. Now, if you're looking for a David Lynch movie that you really want to analyze and find a symbol in, like this is the one to watch. If you want something that's just kind of like dreamlike, surreal, and very neo-noir, Blue Velvet's the one for you.
Yeah.
Do it that way. Who's the hottest guy in Mulholland Drive?
From my style, I would say Justin Theroux, but I think like from a raw sexual piece, I would say Billy Ray.
Billy Ray Cyrus.
He's the muscly.
Yeah, he is.
Except for that mullet. I don't know.
He's just like the way that he acts, he doesn't change his facial expressions. Even when he's supposed to be mad, he's just like blank face. And he was like, hey, don't talk to your wife like that no matter what she did. And I'm like, what the fuck? But Billy Ray Cyrus is hot. But
I'm another version of the superego.
Justin Theroux for me. Like, I just think he's kind of dreamy.
Now let's do the jitterbug. Okay.
And I like his hair.
No.
Billy Ray Cyrus's hair is too long in this film.
Mullet.
Also, what was his big song?
What?
Achy Breaky Heart.
Oh, yeah.
I
don't
just don't
play that song, that achy breaky song.
I just don't think you'd understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any fun facts for me?
Kind of.
Oh shit. Okay. Maybe.
Director David Lynch has used The Wizard of Oz and Sunset Boulevard as inspirations for this film. Both movies we have covered. I don't remember if Sunset Boulevard was a Patreon or not. Or did I just make you watch that? Did we actually cover Sunset Boulevard?
I think we just watched it. We didn't actually do it on Patreon.
Oh, fuck.
There was just a day that we were watching old movies, which I would love to do again soon.
Yeah. No, I think we did some sort of a hot take.
Maybe?
Yeah, because I remember using the line, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, or whatever the fuck.
Possibly.
No.
It wasn't a deep dive. It had
out
to be
there in the dark, or whatever I used at the beginning of the Shooting the Flames.
Where's our Film Flamers historian?
Yeah, it was a hot take somewhere. Well, we can Google it. Anyway, fuck it. As inspirations, yeah, I really actually wanted to like do a huge, like, this is David Lynch's Wizard of Oz, and I did mention it, but like I wanted to line up like, this is the lion, this is the scarecrow. No, I couldn't do it.
That would get much way too fucking allegorical, And,
yeah.
So
because I mean, like if you go back to our deep dive in Wizard of Oz, like those guys like separated, like they were kind of about industries,
right,
rather than like Freudian like symbols. So,
and that was a Baum thing.
It's a Baum thing. Anyway. The set of reels that was distributed to the movie theaters included a computer-written photocopied note from director David Lynch himself, giving special instructions to the projectionists of the world. Specifically, he did not want the film to be centered vertically on the screen, but rather to allow more overhead, as the term in projectionist slang, that is, to let the top part of the frame be more visible than the bottom part. This was because the film was originally made for TV, with an aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1 or 16:9 in mind. Without the projectionist manual correction, the aspect ratio of the theatrical release would have resulted in the heads being cut off the top of the silver screen. Lynch also asked to raise the volume of the theater's sound system by 3 decibels when the film was playing. The note ended with the words, "Your friend, David Lynch."
Oh,
he wasn't Christ.
He wasn't Christ.
So obviously David Lynch originally wrote the basic idea for the story in the 90s as a spin-off of Twin Peaks. I knew it was for TV, but I didn't know it was supposed to be a spin-off. And the character arc of Betty in the movie was actually written for the supporting actor Audrey Horne, who would have been the central figure of the proposed spin-off.
I don't know how successful that series would have been.
Well, if that's what he wanted to do, right? Like, I do feel like he was a pioneer for long form storytelling in the original mystery box that later TV shows like Lost, etc., would kind of capitalize on, right? And he was one of the pioneers for that. And I feel like he really, like Twin Peaks has its abstract, surrealist, dream-like moments, but he's given the time to kind of make it all make sense within the frame, like, and it all kind of fits perfectly like an old fucking shoe, you know? And when he tries to compress it all in something like Mulholland Drive, I'm not sure it works as well as it would have in long form storytelling. So this is an interesting note for me.
And I also, I mean, I think you're right. I think that David Lynch is most successful with his surrealism when he has the time and space to expand on it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's why any surrealist work, at least of literature, is better when it's longer than shorter. So,
yeah.
But that's different.
But then he was just like, fuck it. So, anyway.
Well, if you spend time thinking about something, you still want to have it made. Yeah. Right.
On a particularly bad day of auditioning in Hollywood, before she landed the role, Naomi Watts was driving along Mulholland Drive and imagined herself turning the wheel and going over the edge to her death.
My God.
After several years of getting nowhere and largely being ignored by casting directors, Watts was shocked that not only did director David Lynch meet her in person, but he asked her questions about herself, and she immediately felt relaxed. She was so moved by their conversation, she almost burst into tears after leaving his office.
I keep hearing that he was like a super nice guy.
Really personable, really, cared personally, challenged directly. God damn it, that's my corporate bullshit coming. He really expressed radical candor when he would circle back and put a pin on it.
Oh my God, I cannot work in these environments. I would be like, hush, hush now. But I'm not surprised by any of this. And Naomi Watts, in turn, gave him an amazing performance in this movie.
Yeah, well, she was about to just like give up, right? In fact, I think she lost her apartment after this came out, or as it was coming out after she finished filming, and she was just going to move back to England and give it all up. But her best friend at the time, Nicole Kidman, as you do, just basically told her to wait until at least it comes out. It's a David Lynch movie, for God's sake, and she did. And of course it was basically her portfolio of acting.
There's a moment in this movie that I think just really shows you exactly how good Naomi Watts is. And that's her own audition scene in this movie, right? Where we've seen her play what she wants to do with Rita. And then she actually gets to the audition and she's
same script, two different scenes. Yeah.
She's experiencing like the Me Too of it all. And then she's like, nope.
But she's going to make it work for her, and I just like, I really dug that. But it also is like, actually, no, you're not going to do that movie that you just auditioned for. But I was there in the room, and now you're going to get an even bigger role because I was there to witness it. So it's almost wish film it again. But it really did showcase Naomi Watts' ability to kind of do multi-layered, multi-tiered acting. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how David Lynch kind of found her or decided to essentially cast her instead of, say, Nicole Kidman. But it really cemented her as a talent, and she has had a great career, although not as great as I think she should have.
Yeah, I think she should be cast more often, and that could be her own choice.
And she should have been nominated for
definitely
Best Actress.
And I'm sure that she was on the short list,
I don't know. That could have been the year The Hours came out, and then no other actress in Hollywood couldn't.
But yeah. Anyway, she's wonderful.
Next up, Rebecca Del Rio, the singer at the Club Silencio, first met director David Lynch when a talent agent took her on a whim to a recording studio where Lynch happened to be and asked her to sing a song for him. She performed an impromptu version of Llorando, which also on a whim and without her knowledge was being taped by the audio engineer. Years later, Lynch decided to incorporate the song into his film. However, except for a few minor tweaks, this was the exact same recording used in the movie.
Everything is a recording. That's an amazing anecdote that I did not know. When I first saw this movie,
finally,
I was obsessed with this version of the song, right? Because I loved Blue Velvet already. And there is a Roy Orbison song that is featured prominently in that. And Llorando is the Spanish version of a Roy Orbison song, Crying. And I was just like, oh my God, the connections are everywhere in this Lynchian universe. And it blew my little 20-year-old mind or whatever the fuck. And I downloaded it on Napster and I listened to it like constantly. There's my own anecdote.
Oh.
Yeah.
Finally, Luigi Castigliani, I don't know how to say that, the mobster who spits out the espresso on the napkin.
Yeah.
That was played by the film's composer, Angelo Badalamenti.
That's right. Oftentimes used by Tarantino as well, right?
I did not know that or think that. Interesting about that score, though, it's almost soundtrack spoilers, because we do really get that Twin Peaks 80s, kind of early 90s, like synthesizer X-Files type of situation going on.
Yep.
But there's also orchestral versions and then noir versions, you know, and depending on the scene and where it is, it kind of tells you which is closest to reality versus dream. And so that's another thing I'm going to be paying attention to when I rewatch it decades from now.
Don't do it tomorrow.
By which time I will forget completely about that anecdote.
I want you to take a break from Lynch, you know, after this month, but I think that we should come back and watch some other Lynch movies because they're not as good as the two that we've done. I mean, like Lost Highway is an amazing soundtrack, less amazing movie.
You are the perfect drug.
Thank you, Trent. But like things like Wild at Heart, I think are really good. His filmography is good.
I also want to see Straight Story because that's supposed to be like the best thing he's ever done. Also, we realized that he's done some sort of like horror anthology.
Yeah, I have to look this up.
Called Rabbits.
I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, and it's like supposed to be more straight up horror.
That will be going on my list of things to watch. Well, those were fun facts. I especially enjoyed the Rebecca Del Rio one. But I think that just about wraps up our conversation on Mulholland Drive. As always, we want to know what you think about this movie. What are your interpretations of things? You can find us on social media at The Film Flamers on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, all the places.
You can email us at tiredqueens@filmflamers.com or call our hotline at 972-666-7733. I want you to call me and say, she's the girl. Now it's dark.
Wait,
and full of terrorists.
Also, wrong movie. That also wraps up all of our content on the main feed. But as Chris said, there was a poll over on Patreon where
we stripped.
Where people got to choose a Lynch film for us to cover as a bonus episode. So head over to patreon.com/thefilmflamers. See if you can still vote in that poll. Maybe it's not too late.
Now, Eraserhead?
And stay on the lookout for more bonus polls to vote in.
Bonus polls.
Bonus polls. Like the one I'm sporting right now. Such a bonus poll for David Lynch.
Oh, you do.
All right, Chris. I'm going to have to get some rest and have some sleeps before we watch Eraserhead or whatever it's going to be.
So you can have some sweet dreams.
Not after watching those movies.
Nope. No. Dreams are fucked. Happy Lynchian dreams.
Just call me Robert Selwyn.
Are you sporting a bonus poll this month?
I love it. I love it when we come up with new things to say.
Every morning. Okay.
Geek.
Yo estaba bien por un tiempo, volviendo a sonreír. Luego anoche te vi, tu mano me tocó y el saludo de tu voz. Te hablé muy bien y tú, sin saber que he estado llorando por tu amor, llorando por tu amor. Luego de tu adiós sentí todo sola y llorando, 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 no es fácil de entender que al verte otra vez yo esté llorando. Yo que pensé que te olvidé, pero es verdad, es la verdad, que te quiero aún más, mucho más que ayer. Dime tú qué puedo hacer, no me quieres y siempre estaré llorando por tu amor, llorando por tu amor, tu amor se llevó todo y quedó llorando, llorando.